let me, the chap on the left, wearing a t-shirt and being, kind of cool and young and all the rest of it. I used to be cool and young like that. I'm not anymore. I'm just an old git now. But anyway, he's cool and young and all the rest of it. Nelson and I share a publisher, so I've got to be very careful. He's written books. He's the CEO of How Now. He's founded this very, very successful company in quite a short space of time, which is brilliant. And obviously the key focus around what How Now does is around personalisation and supporting learning at work. He's going to be joined by Sophia Ridge in a little moment on stage to talk about her experience, personalised sales learning journeys within the world of sales enablement, revenue enablement, and revenue opportunities within the software industry. So pretty important that they get people trained well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Nelson. Don't forget, folks, think of some questions. We'll have time at the end for those. Nelson, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Everyone can hear me? Just put your finger in your nose if you can hear me. Yeah, perfect. All right. We're going to kick this off with some bingo. Who's played bingo? I'm always surprised by how many people say they play bingo. But anyway, we're going to start with a game of birthday bingo. Right? I'm going to shout out a date. If you were born on that date, put your hand up. 27th. No one? All right. 11th. One person. All right, I'll do one more. 3rd. Okay, pretty bad. Normally it's not that bad. But why are we playing bingo? Because often I feel like the way we do L&D in our organizations is often a bit like bingo. Now let me explain. What happens is one day a manager comes along to us and says, I would like to have training X. We then go away for the next 6 months, either trying to procure that training or even worse, trying to create that training program ourselves. It's gone through so many iterations and revisions, we've actually convinced ourselves that we've built the most beautiful training program. It has workbooks, there's animations, it's got everything. And then one fine day, we decide we're going to push this out to everyone in the organization who can breathe. And then that day when it goes out, some people engage, but most people don't. That's a bit like when I call out a number and none of you put your hand up, or one person puts their hand up. That one person engages, they look at the training material or the content, they might get some value, or you chase them to complete. Often what we find is more and more organizations are playing what we call L&D bingo. They're calling out a number, but no one has the matching number out there. And every time they play L&D bingo and they lose, it's a waste of time, money, and resources. Now, how many people are playing L&D bingo? Well, let's have a look at the number. So we spent 350 billion or more. That's like the equivalent of more than 60 countries worth of GDP we spent on L&D in a single year. Now, when you look at the data, this one hurts. 51% of executives who were surveyed said they thought their company's existing L&D programs was a waste of time. Only 12% of employees said they applied anything that they got from the learning programs that they engage with. And 75% of employees would not recommend their L&D function. Now, what that tells you is there's a lot of money being spent on playing L&D bingo, but a lot of people are losing. Now, why does that happen? Now, often we make the misconception that we think it's content. So what we do is year after year, we pump more money into quote-unquote fun and interactive content, because surely that would solve the problem. But I don't understand why we have an obsession with interactive content. When was the last time you felt the need for a YouTube video to have something that you needed to click for you to finish the video? No? You didn't feel like you missed interactivity on a YouTube video, but you feel like your online course needs it? I don't know why. But the problem isn't the content. The problem is the fact that we start with content. What we're doing is we ask 2 questions. We ask, what content do you need? And how am I going to get that content to you? But what we're doing is we're ignoring the wider context by starting with content. We don't know what is it they need and why do they need that? What's the business context that you're trying to achieve? By ignoring the context, it's almost like fish out of water. In the same way fish out of water don't last, It's the same way when you start with content and ignore the context, you've got very little chance of being able to engage your employees. Now, I just want to point out, engagement isn't the end goal, but it is the primary requirement for any learning to take place in your organization, and for any of the other good stuff like the behavior change and all of that to happen, you need to be able to engage them first. And without getting the engagement, what you have is this situation where you've got a lack of business buy-in. As we saw early on with the stat, you've got the C-suite who think it's a waste of time, so it's hard for you to get budget. Even worse, it's hard for you to get the engagement from your managers and the leadership team. And then the other side, you've got employees who are frustrated because they're just seeing things that are irrelevant to them, that are not helping them grow in their career and build the skills they need. So in essence, when you take a content-first approach, learning feels like an interruption from work. If you look at the number of times, how many times have you spoken to people in your organization and they've said the lack of time is the barrier to them learning? What that means is they don't have time to spend on things that are irrelevant to them. They're not saying they don't have time to learn, because they are learning outside of work. Most of them are probably listening to podcasts or reading blogs. They are learning. They just don't have time to learn things that you think are important but are not actually important to them. So how can we close this engagement gap? So what we need to do is we now need to speak a language the business understands. L&D, we've got ourselves into a bit of a rut where we use jargon that only other L&D people really care about. Do you really think your C-suite care about how many people took a course, whether they completed the course or not? Do you really think employees care how many courses they've done or how many training programs they've enrolled onto? But what they all care about is skills. It's a language that they all understand. You can go to the C-suite and say, we don't have skills X, Y, Z to achieve this. They will get that. You can go to an employee and say, you need to have skills A, B, C to achieve this. They'll get that. So what we need to do is stop speaking a language that only L&D people care about and start speaking in a way the rest of the organization understand. Now that is the key. To speak that common language is the fundamental requirement for us to be able to truly personalize learning. So what does it look like for us to shift from a content-first approach to a skills-first approach to learning? So let's look at the first thing. What we're doing right now when we take a content-first approach is we're trying to understand and identify content needs. Right? How many people in the room have done a training needs analysis? Right? Where we're asking what training do you need? Right? Instead, what we need to do is rather than reacting to those, because often by the time we've done training needs analysis, the problem could have existed in your organization for the last 6 months. So we need to be ahead of the curve. We need to be proactive. To be able to do that, what we need to be able to do is be able to track and measure skills in our organization. How many people measure skills in their organization? Right? Only a few people. But fundamentally, we're trying to help people build the skills they need to perform better and grow in their career. How can we do that if we don't know what skills they're supposed to have and what skills they have today, so we can identify those gaps and bridge them? If we were measuring skills, we'd be able to do it proactively. The next one is around what we create. Right now, in many organizations we work with, L&D teams almost start off as production facilities, where they're just churning out one program after another. But we need to shift away from creating course catalogs and training programs to approaching learning from an ecosystem perspective. Now, to give you an example of this, I want you to think about the last time you learned something that had a big impact on your performance or career. Take a moment to think about that. Now, I want you to put your hand up whether that learning took place inside an LMS. Isn't that ironic, given how many of you would spend money on an LMS and chase employees to come into that LMS? Now, put your hand up if that learning took place with a book, a webinar, a podcast, a blog, speaking to a colleague, right? Going to an event like this, right? There are so many different ways we learn, right? And it depends on the context of that. So what we need to recognize is people will learn with or without L&D. Now, that doesn't mean we all need to change our career. What that means is actually there's more of a focus for L&D to not to be the ones who are creating the content, but the ones who are essentially bringing that ecosystem together and taking the friction out of bringing that ecosystem together. So we need to start creating learning ecosystems and not content catalogs. The next one is how we deliver precise learning rather than one size fits all. Now this is where we really need to tap into the data that we have within our organization. Rather than pushing content out based on arbitrary business rules, you're in the sales team, so you have to learn this. Instead, what we need to do is look at both push and pull learning. So do you right now have a single front door to all of your learning where people know they can go and search and find the learning they need? Or what we often see with organizations is L&D are having to be the navigators, where someone messages them to go, where do I find this? Do you really want to spend your time being the ones who go, you need to go here to find this, you need to... When there's that much friction, employees don't have the time or the patience to stick around and search for it. They'll just go somewhere else, and often it's Google or YouTube where they'll go because it's easier for them to find what they're looking for. So what we need to start looking at is push learning based on the data we have in the organization, like the skills data, but also create a space where we can enable self-directed learning. The key part here is that access in the moment of need. Now, we're most motivated to learn in the moment of need. And the best example of that is Google search. When you need to know something, you'll go to Google search. You'll search, you'll find something. You're more likely to engage with it. You're more likely to apply it. Now, when you do that, what it does is it creates a positive feedback loop. Because you apply it, you see the results, you're now more likely to go back to Google search. That positive feedback loop is what's missing within workplace learning. Right? That we don't see it through to create that feedback loop where I've seen the result, I found something in the moment of need, I engaged with it, I applied it, I saw the results. Now the next time I need something, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to the resources that L&D are providing me. With that positive feedback loop, for it to exist, we need to be able to really understand those moments of need and deliver it then, because that's when they're most motivated to engage. Now the last step in moving towards a skills-first approach to L&D is about what you measure. Now this is where I often say, you achieve what you measure. If you're not measuring impact, you're not going to be able to achieve it. The best demonstration of this in our personal lives is how many people count their steps? Right? Now, all of us are probably familiar with the idea of 10,000 steps. Now just think about, before that idea of measuring your steps came in, who cared about how many steps you did? You achieve what you measure. So you need to start measuring it for the business and for yourself to really care about it. And that's where we need to move away from what L&D cares about, the leading indicators like your time spent learning and your completion rates, and actually really need to think about the whole spectrum. Right? We need to look at the engagement, like for example, some of the data points our customers look at is real-time search data. Rather than waiting for training needs analysis, they can look at right now, today, 70% of people are searching for negotiation skills. Just imagine what you would do with that real-time insight. Right? You can meet those needs far quicker. And this is where you look at skills. And often I get this question around ROI. Of course it's going to be difficult to demonstrate ROI if all you're talking about is course completion rates and enrollments. But what if I could connect spend directly to the skills that improved? If I knew the baseline when I started was a level 3 proficiency for negotiation skills, and over a period of what we've done, we've managed to move that average proficiency to a level 4 in a particular team. We can now see exactly how our spend connects back to skills development. And we can then tie that skills data back to performance data. Now, often the pushback I get here is, it's so hard to demonstrate the impact we've had on performance. Now, let's look at how we do that. Is quantitative and qualitative data. Let's say we're trying to improve sales performance. You might start by saying, okay, what was the win rate when we started? All right, it was 10%. We want to move it in the direction of 30%. That's where we want to get to. So you can track that metric. All you need to do is speak to the right people in your organization. Then I get the pushback, well, Nelson, just because the win rate went up, it doesn't mean L&D did a good job. That's where qualitative data comes in, where we now speak to the people who are involved in the sales team, the sales leaders, and we ask them, look, we can start to see you're performing better. what changed? Right? What caused that change in your behavior? And they'll start to tell you. One of the things may have been, actually, I've been being mentored by someone in the organization. That really helped. Actually, I took this course that really helped. What we need to get away from is L&D can't be the solo hero. No function can. And the business's expectation from us isn't to be the solo hero. They just want to know that we are influencing the way we perform. So this is what that shift looks like. But right now, sounds great. If we move from a content first to a skills first, what we're able to do is stop learning feeling like an interruption and instead make meaningful learning feel like a part of everyday work. Now, I want to show you where the problem here is often we don't have the technology and the tools to be able to enable this. Because all of the tech and tools that we see were actually built for an old world. They were built for the content first world. And that's where the problem is. So if you look at something like an LMS, it was built for content storage, right? It's great when it comes to compliance. They don't really care about user experience. You just need people to go find content and complete it in one place. But actually it lacks the integrations to bring the ecosystem together, and it's very top-down in its approach. Then you've got content libraries, which are great for the variety of content you might be able to get, but actually it's not contextually aware for your organization. It doesn't know what skills you have and don't have in your business. And then you've got learning budgets. I see this in many companies because it's the easiest thing to implement. I mean, how easy is it to go, every person is going to get £100 a year to spend on learning? Go figure. Right? But the problem is, how do you align it to the skills that you want to develop as an organization? So what we need to do is look at what does the technology look like that was built for skills first. Now this is what we think the tech stack looks like. So you've got the learning ecosystem piece. So you need something that can integrate with all the APIs of whether it's mentoring, your resources, your courses, informal, formal, to bring all of that learning together into a single searchable place. Then the second part is the skills intelligence that runs it. All of this needs to be based on skills. Now there's a key piece here where all of these elements are built on. They're built on AI. Now often what you've seen so far is the low-hanging fruit of AI, which is let's create more content. Now honestly, when was not enough content a problem? What we're doing right now is using AI to scale the problem. Right? It was hard enough when we had 1,000 pieces of content. Now we have 1 million pieces of content in very little time with AI. But AI can really help us move to a skills-first approach, which is, for example, we use AI to tag all of the learning resources in your ecosystem with your company's skills framework. That's critical. Because every provider you work with will have their own tagging system and their own skills framework that they're using, which isn't great because you need it to align to your organization's skills framework. The skills-based personalization. You want to be able to make inferences on what skills people might have based on their previous work history, based on the work they're doing. AI can help you build that skills framework. What would have taken you 10 years ago, a consultant spending 12 months with you to create an Excel and spreadsheet with a skills framework, then it's someone's job to keep it continuously up to date. AI can build that mapping, keep it up to date based on real-time job market data today. That's what we should be using AI for. And then learning in the flow of work. What we can use AI for is to understand where are you right now? What tool are you inside? What app are you inside? Or what physical environment are you inside? And to make predictions around what might be relevant learning for you in that moment of need. And that's what we think the tech stack looks like. Now this right now might seem like theory. And that's why I want to invite up Sophia Ridge from Orbis Software, who not only applied skills first L&D, but also built an award-winning onboarding program based on it.
Thank you.
So, firstly, congratulations
Thank you.
on building an award-winning program. I thought a great place to start is, since we spoke about what skills do you need and actually trying to build, how did you decide what are the areas that you need to attack in terms of problem and skills gaps?
Yeah, so it was an interesting one. And I think we discussed this earlier. Coming from a sales enablement world, I know a lot about sales and I work a lot with salespeople. And one of their key things is discovery. It's the first step of the sales cycle. You go to the potential customer in this case, the end learner or the managers of these learners, and you discover what they need, you discover what their challenges are. And so a big piece of building out our onboarding programs was about discovery and continual discovery. So with our sales enablement programs, we started with kind of everybody needs to know who we are as a business. Everybody needs to know what we sell, what we do. Everybody needs to know who we sell to, but the key one, how we do it, how we sell, what are those skills. And even people who aren't in sales need to know that about the business that they work in. So that's kind of how we started with the skills.
I think I love that approach because often we see people rushing to an output, right? Where how often do you know little about a problem, but like I mentioned earlier, managers ask for X, so we rush to getting the output out there. But the time that you spent up front to do the problem discovery. But I know during that problem discovery, you kind of iterated and pivoted on what you needed to solve that problem.
Yeah, so try to stay agile with things because we are a small organization, our needs change often, as does our hiring plan. So originally the plan was to build a 30-day onboarding program for account executives, so new business sales reps. During building that, it suddenly became clear that that left-hand side of what you can see on the slide there was actually so relevant for everybody who joined the company. And so we then were able to have an onboarding program for everybody who joined the company based on that 30-day program. Then it became very clear that we had a cohort of account managers joining instead of just account executives. So we were able to pivot again and build out a 60-day program for account managers. So again, you can see on the screen the different elements, but they're all kind of built on this one basis. And then since then, it's pivoted again as people have got wind of the great work that we've got with this onboarding program. We're even taking it out into external people, so not just our internal learners. We've got partners of our business. So as a software company, we have software partners who sell on our behalf, so they will go to their own cohort of customers and sell for us. Those partners need to be enabled in the same way as our own salespeople. So again, we've pivoted, repackaged that same content, and been able to deliver it to them as well.
So after you did the problem discovery, you defined kind of what skills that you needed to be able to address as a part of this program. Going into a bit more about the kind of learning experience design piece, I know you didn't dive into authoring a course and you thought about it more from an ecosystem approach. So could you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, so a lot of what you were saying there, I mean, obviously it resonates really well. We have a broader ecosystem of tools that we use as a company. One of the key ones being HighSpot. I don't know if anyone here has heard of or uses HighSpot. It's a sales enablement platform, but a content management platform. So every piece of external facing sales content and marketing content sits on there. And then our sales teams can push that out to customers and track who's viewing what. That's what they're using on a day-to-day basis. That's what our current teams are using, and that's where they will be looking for content. So despite the fact that our learning system is a great place for them to start in the onboarding, we need them to be getting into the habit of also using our kind of day-to-day tool. But what's great is that it's that kind of that front door piece that you talked about with having everything in one place, giving that structure, so that when they're in that moment of need, they search on HighSpot. Again, the AI capabilities. You can ask it a question. I need some skills on sales negotiation. We have linked in the learning courses. So if they've come across content that they don't feel like they've got enough knowledge on, they can then go back into the learning system and learn more. But it's a two-way piece. So from the learning piece, they go into the content. From the content place, they can go back into the learning.
So you were bringing together, like HighSpot is one example, but you were bringing together kind of other third-party content libraries.
Yeah.
I thought also the work you were doing, quite interestingly, with working with your internal experts to also capture what was in their minds. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it was a challenge, to put it lightly. We are a 20-year-old business, and there is so much content. unfortunately, a lot of that content is actually sitting in people's heads. There wasn't so much on paper. There wasn't a big content catalog. There wasn't a big content library. And what content there was so spread around. The number of SharePoint sites that I uncovered when I was building out this program. We talk about pivoting and discovery and uncovering content. But so much was sat in people's heads. So it was a case of what can we extract, combine with additional external content, and curate a great program that brings together both skills and internal Orbis content.
So how do you know it was a success? How do you know it had any good impact in the business?
What an award. We talked about metrics. You talk about course completion not being a good indicator. Completely agree. And I talk about sales teams because they're the people I work with most closely. With sales teams, it's how quickly can they get to the point of being confident to talk to a prospect or talk to a customer. Can we standardize that and speed up that process so they can join our business and then be confidently hosting customer meetings more quickly? So that's like a great metric. It's like a really easy one to track for us.
How did you track that? How were you tracking whether they're actually applying what they learned?
I mean, there's lots of ways. In terms of, CRM data, so we use Salesforce CRM, so we can see which meetings our new hires are joining, so we can track who's joining what and who else they're joining with. So we can track the ramp time on that, so we can see how quickly that they are actually getting in front of customers. I
guess I know you were saying, talking about the performance data really helped you get exposure and buy-in for the wider business. How did that play out?
So I think it's with Orbis. You knew our previous structure. We used to have a learning enablement function, and then we went through a restructure last year. So I now sit in the revenue team. And one thing that you talked about that really resonated just now was about speaking to the teams and getting feedback on the ground and hearing from people. One of my massive learnings was when I started sitting with the sales team. Previously, I was sat, just like in the office, I was just sat with the people team, with the learning team, going and sitting next to the sales team and listening to their day-to-day problems, listening to their calls, listening to them talk to each other, opened up a whole new world of ideas and possibilities and opportunities to get straight to the heart of the problem and also integrate with them and get their buy-in and get their respect.
Yeah.
It's so important. And then the same with the sales leaders. Just getting in front of them and speaking to them regularly about the great work that we're doing, and they see the benefit when they save time. So one of the metrics that we tracked with our account management onboarding program, I think I worked it out that we roughly saved, for every single new account manager we hired, we saved 12 hours of teaching time. So each line manager of an account manager would spend roughly 12 hours telling their new hire what we do, how to do it. Really basic things that we've now brought into a course. But I haven't taken away their time, their one-on-one time. We've now brought in 6 plus hours of coaching time. And not only does that help the new account managers when they're starting, but it helps develop those line managers. It's something that is a widely known thing that you tend to promote people who are good at what they do. They're not necessarily always going to be the best line managers. They need development themselves. So it's about not forgetting those managers and ensuring that they also have the chance to develop.
Last one before I open the floor to questions is actually the award submission process itself. So talk to us about how do you win one of these awards?
So it was the Learning Technologies Awards. There's a process where you create a written application. We worked alongside one of our third-party providers and pulled together this written submission, and then there was a presentation, so built out a presentation. It had lots of animation in it, I'm sure you've seen it. this slide built nicely. And then it was a panel of judges, I think it was a half hour, maybe 45-minute call. And then we got to go to a fancy dinner and won the award.
Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Hello. I have a questions just about the assessment that you run for the programs, what consists of, what kind of assessment type do you have? Do you, to assess the skill or to measure the progress of the skills, what's in the program in terms of assessments?
Yeah, so how did you go about assessing the skills? I know you did kind of demo role plays and assessments there.
Yeah, so in one of our programs, every single week we put in a role play assessment. So it's something that you may do at kind of SKOs or at live events, but we've brought that into the program. So the learners speak with their line manager. They have a week to prepare for each role play. They record their session, and then they submit through How Now the recording of their session. They have verbal feedback from their line manager, and it's scored through the system, and so we get to have a record of all of the assessments that have been completed. So we've got recordings of everybody completing these role plays, and so then we've got record of that skill. Because we also incorporate skills courses from our third-party provider, we've also got the kind of more standardized metrics of assessment there as well.
We often find when you're taking a content-first approach to onboarding, you often try to dump everything you think everyone needs to know within those kind of first few days. But actually, when you take a more skills-first approach to it, you're actually trying to look at what are the skills they need to achieve that first milestone. So from a sales perspective, it might be that SDR making that first call or the account executive joining that first customer call. And it's actually a lot more focused around making sure they're only learning and you're only assessing what they need to know for that first milestone.
Thank you.
You've got that idea of speed to competence, i.e. the ability to manage the call on their own. How do you stop that becoming some kind of target, and thereby people putting themselves into a position beyond their competence because it's the doing the call on your own, not having the skills to do it? How do you manage that process?
Yeah, I think one of the it's an interesting one, because I don't think people are aware that it's necessarily tracked, that they're being tracked to when they can do it by themselves, because they have the full backing of their team, their manager, their colleagues alongside them in the calls. And when they're competent and they've been deemed competent by their managers and by their teammates, that's probably realistically the point where they will go it alone. So it's qualitative. It's not a quantitative thing. Right. It's not okay, you've completed this assessment, you're ready now, go into the world. Yeah. So there's a check and balance within the way that you manage it, which I guess is where we've got time for at least one more question if someone has one. Don't scratch your ear, sir, you will be given a microphone. Any further questions? I've got one which is around the ability to be clear in your communication within the organisation about what skills are. Because very often I hear people within L&D conversations, not just within other functions of the business, talking to their board, talking to their colleagues about things which I would not consider a skill. So first of all, how important was it to be clear about the difference between a skill and something else, a trait or knowledge or whatever it was? And how easy was it for the business, both more widely and within Orbis software specifically, to kind of get that actually, no, this is a skill, that's not a skill? In all honesty, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think it's an easy place to get to, and I think there's still there's still a mountain to climb, especially with our business. I talked about the restructure, the constant different focus. It's difficult. It is difficult to have that nomenclature around what skills are and what the rest of it is.
Yeah.
What I talked about a bit at the beginning is the who we are, what we sell, and who we sell to. For me, that's kind of the other stuff. Then it's the how. The
Yes.
how piece is the skills. And it is hard to define, and it's not an easy thing. There's a difference. Every single person stood at these stands here today is doing a sales job. They're stood in front of you and they are trying to talk to you about what they sell or what their business does. There's a difference between the people who know exactly what they're talking about and the ones who've got the skills to be approachable and to be funny and interesting, and the ones who will nail you down at the end of the conversation to get your details and to book in time to chat with you. Those are the skills, and that's the how for me.
Thank you.
I think more broadly speaking, I think in terms of definition, like where we've seen it done well is quite simply saying, if I watch the video of someone riding a bike and I can repeat back the steps on, you put your foot on the pedal, you do this, and that's the kind of knowledge part of it. If I can actually get on the bike and ride it, and then I'm showing you the skill. But where I've seen is, rather than necessarily getting into the semantics of is this a skill or not, what we found is more important is the purpose for you bringing in skills.
Right.
So, some organizations where it gets a bit tainted when you brought it in to use it as a way of measuring and getting people ready for promotion. So there's almost this element of, I've done training for this skill, so I'm ready to be promoted, because on your skills framework it says if I've got this skill, which I've got a certificate for, I'm ready to be promoted. And I think that's a bit of a dangerous grey zone, because then people, depending on how you're measuring skills, so the way we recommend in many organizations is using a 360 feedback. You combine self-assessment, peer assessment, and manager assessment. Reason why we recommend it, because it's evidence-based, because the best people to see whether you're applying that skill or not within a work context are the people you work with. Now, let's say you took that approach, then for people to be honest in their self-assessment, they're only going to be honest and authentic if they know it's for you to better support them. Right? Like, you're not going to use this to penalize me. If I tell you I'm a 2 out of 5, you're not going to use that to penalize my growth. Actually, you're using that data to tailor and better support my development. And so I think what's important is, if you are introducing skills into your organization, is to be very clear around what you're using this data for and what's in it for them. I mean, what's in it for them is a key question we should be answering for anything we're doing in L&D and HR. But specifically, if you're going to bring in skills, to really articulate what's in it for them by them getting involved in this process.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we are just about being by the clock. Yes, Toby's nodding his head at me, so that means that we're going to wrap it up. So first of all, join me in thanking Nelson and Sophia for their inputs. Thank you very much indeed, folks. Really good.